Today is Sunday, and I woke up thinking, all right, there's a church somewhere, or there are churches all around today, and there's a pastor, male or female, and they are there, and they're up there in the front, and they're lecturing or they're preaching, and they're talking to the congregation, they're talking to the group. And I also thought about how structured the church service is. And everything is going towards a certain schedule. And there's usually not much group interaction because that is the way the church service goes. So in thinking about this, it made me think about that time when I facilitated a support group at the family services in Harrison, New York. So I was kind of making parallels. And you see, when I facilitate a support group, I'm not the leader. I'm the facilitator. So my job is not to stand in front of the group to lecture or teach. My job is to facilitate this group by encouraging each person to share their experiences, their successes, and their failures. Why? Because people learn from each other. It's like the scientific fact that people learn from each other. So in this particular support group that I was facilitating, it was for members who were struggling with mental health. So my job was to facilitate and move the conversation so that each person could speak or tell an experience or difficulty, and then we could all converse about it, and most of the conversation would have to be, I would have to facilitate the conversation so that everybody got a chance to speak. So I would ask questions. When something was said, I would say to someone else, well, what do you think about that? I had certain cues that I would use, and I would remember the experiences of each person, so I know that there's people in this group that have conquered certain things and learned to do certain things in a different way that really, really help them. And even if I didn't know any of that information, by facilitating the group and encouraging them to talk amongst each other, these types of things will come out. Now, even if my job was to teach this group of people daily living skills to help them in their struggle, with mental health, still, I continue to learn from them. I'm going to be learning from them. A group effort is powerful when you compare it to one person claiming to know all things. Obviously, no matter what level we're on, we each have something to offer for the good of the whole. So even in Scripture, we understand that each member of a church has a gift, a spiritual gift, that Scripture tells us, these are used for edifying the whole body, edifying the whole group, edifying the congregation, or whatever we're calling it. So, but, there's a few flies in the ointment in church that I thought about today. We have the basic tenets of the gospel that we believe. However, confusion sets in. Since we have all these denominations, various doctrines, sects, splinter groups, religious cults, etc., etc. So problems arise there. So even sometimes if the group is able to help each other on certain points and give their experiences, then, on the other hand now, we get into conflicts because this one person believes the scripture doesn't say that, and another person believes, oh, yes, the scripture does say that. For instance, when we start discussing whether or not a woman can be a pastor, now you've really created a bombshell now. Now it's a big discussion. Now everybody is split. Now feelings get hurt. Now arguments start. I've experienced that. And that's an example. Then some other examples we have are, well, I could give one example. I'm in a church, and I was actually assisting in running the women's group, and of course, there we are, me and the other women, and we are running this group. And here's the thing: within that group, I know I found for myself someone who had more experience in a certain area than I did. And in that church, I was fairly new compared to this other member that was in my group. So I began to talk to her after this group and befriended her, and she really became of a great help to me. And at that time, I was suffering I couldn't sleep. I was having a lot of trouble sleeping. And this sister pulled me aside one day, and she just said, the Lord, he never slumbers or sleeps. And that's basically all she said. She gave me that scripture. And I know I've seen that scripture several times, and of course read it several times. But when she said it to me that day, that scripture just hit me. It just hit me. And I just got this full of understanding that, hey, God, he does not slumber and he does not sleep. He's there so that I don't have to worry. He's there. God is there. I don't have to worry. And even in explaining that to you right now, it's hard to explain because when she said it, there was this immediate and powerful understanding, and I just got a feeling of security within myself and like a healing. And from that day on, I didn't have any more trouble sleeping. It really was just that easy. And of course you weren't there, and of course, you're not me, and you could maybe even doubt what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that was my experience. So what I'm trying to say in this is, we have a lot of leaders, and I can't say that I had years of experience leading because I didn't. But I know this is true, that we have a lot of leaders who there are people in their congregation that can help them overcome some issue or problem or situation in their own life. And that member of that church who's a member can minister to that leader if they would listen and if they would allow it. Okay? For instance, you have some people in congregations, they've gone through something, and they've conquered that thing, and they've walked with the Lord on it, and they know something that someone else in that congregation does not know, and they have a message, and they have help that they can give somebody else, but they don't have a ministry, and they're not talking. They're just sitting in church Sunday after Sunday, listening to the man in front or the woman in front, giving the message and giving the helps and giving the scripture. Meanwhile, this particular person could minister to sister so-and-so or sister or brother so-and-so and walk them through their situation, disciple somebody. And I don't ascribe to the idea that, you just sit in the church year after year after year and you serve and you sweep the floor and you wash the toilets and you carry the pastor's Bible and you press the pastor's clothes or you take the pastor's wife's clothing to the cleaners and you babysit the pastor's family, and you do that for a couple of years and you prove yourself worthy as this, attendant to the leaders of the church. I don't prescribe to that kind of idea, because now the pastor and his family have made the members of the congregation into servants. Meanwhile, every member, first of all, has a gift. That we know from Scripture. Whatever the gift is, there's gifts there in the church. And I just want to know, when was the last time you heard a sermon or a teaching on gifts? And does your pastor know your gift? Do you know your gift? And is your gift being used? Because I don't believe that the gifts are supposed to be contingent on how much you serve in the building. I don't see it that way. And I know, and I'm going back to the support group model, when I facilitated these support groups, they didn't have to come in there and clean the room, carry my clipboard, carry my bag, whatever I had. They didn't have to come in there and prove themselves to me before they could speak. We already had that established from the door. I know that everybody in that room had an experience or a difficulty that they overcame, and that they could share in that group and help somebody. Goodness, even our children have taught us, if we allowed them. So, as I said, I was thinking about that today. I said, in church, there's a gathering, and there's one person there up in front, and they're dictating, teaching, pastoring, and whatever they're doing, right? But there's the people in the congregation sitting and absorbing it all. Meanwhile, I know that within those groups are people with experiences that they need to share that can help the next person, because we're a body with many parts. And I don't know what kind of whole, healthy body has parts that are just not operating, just not performing, just not taking part. There's different types of things that people go through, that they've walked through and had a lot of success with, according to the faith we believe. But they're not talking, or they're not speaking in the church, and they're not sharing those experiences. I mean, I'm not saying it happens all the time. I'm just saying that is something I notice. Right? I think that once we believe that we know everything, we're really at a loss. I think we're at a great loss. That once we think that we know everything about Scripture and everything about everything, and that we are the pastor and that we're going to do everything. I mean, I've been in churches like that. The pastor wants to do it all. He wants to, he wants to do every ministry. He believes he has all the gifts, and he believes he's the expert, and he's going to remain the expert, and nobody is going to disturb that. And if they try to, they become a threat now. Oh, this person is trying to muscle in on my ministry. This person is controlling. This person is the other. This person is this and that. This person is just a problem in this church, causing confusion. Because, anytime if you're going to say something or challenge something the pastor says, all of a sudden, you're a confusion starter. This happens. Not saying it happens all the time, but it does happen. And then now what the pastor can do now is if he feels threatened by that, he can start turning people against you and saying, certain things about you that just aren't true. For instance, that happened with this woman I told you about. She brought me a scripture that basically delivered me, helped me, brought me through. While yet at the same time, the talk in the church was that something was wrong with her. And she was this and she was that. And, people gossip in church. And you hear different things about people. So that was amazing to me. I said, wow, here is this woman that as soon as I came in this church, I heard this, that, and the other. Yet she came to me so powerfully in the Word, not only shared that scripture, but shared some other scripture and some other teachings and some other experiences from her life with me that I found extremely helpful, that really set me on a path to discover more and gave me even a greater interest in studying the Word. There I was running this women's group. She was in it. She was in the group. And I began to lean on her for certain things. Okay? You've got people in congregations that have been delivered from drug addiction. They've recovered from depression. They've had experience with grief and how to get through it and how the Lord can help you through it. They've had experiences where they lost their jobs or they lost their career or they lost their business. And they have experiences. They have situations they can talk about. They could tell you how the Lord brought them through. We have parents in the church with children. They've had difficulties with their children, but the Lord has brought them through, and they have something to teach, something to tell. They have a clue, or they have a scripture, or they have a teaching that will help somebody. We have women in the church that have dealt with certain experiences with family and with children, with husbands and all like that, all things like that. They have walked a certain walk. They have learned something that can help the congregation, that can help somebody there. We have young people in the congregation who have had issues and situations. And it don't have to be the pastor's children. The pastor's children don't always know everything. Sometimes the pastor's children are in trouble. But we have teenagers in churches that have gone through, that have a story since they were 12 years old or since they were 11 years old, and they can help some other teenager in the church. But the church does not do that. What they do is they randomly, whatever way that they judge, they pick A person and B person and C person to get up there and run this ministry or that ministry or the other, depending on were they dedicated to the pastor and did they do A, B, C, D, and did they prove themselves. So for me, when I think about it, I think back to when I was leading support groups, as I said in the beginning, and how they didn't have to prove anything to me. They just came with their experiences, how they overcame, and it helped the whole group. the whole group. Okay? And that gathering of experiences helped the whole group. And they were each allowed to speak, tell their story. Not at some testimony time once a week, but every time we met, the focus was, and the belief for me was, that every person has something to offer where they can help each other and me.